So I'm Greg Mackling. I am currently the co-host of the morning show on 680 CJOB. It's called The Start. I'm one of 3 hosts, and I've been hosting that program now for going on 5 years. I can't believe it's been that long. I've been in broadcasting for just over a dozen years now. It was always a dream of mine to work in broadcasting, and I had a very surreptitious route to that world. So mental health issues, really unbeknownst to me, have been an issue in my family since I was born. It wasn't until my mom was in her early 40s that she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And it wasn't until June of 2000, when I was in a serious car accident in Calgary, that I started to battle some of the same things. In June of 2000, I was sitting at a red light on a Friday night in Southeast Calgary, and I got rear-ended by a young woman driving over the speed limit. I was stopped. She hit me at over 80 kilometers per hour. My car was thrown through the intersection. Fortunately, there were no vehicles coming in either direction, but my car was severely damaged, and it probably wasn't for about 18 months until I realized how badly I was damaged. I ended up in the hospital a couple of days after my accident. That athlete state of mind, if you will, took over. That survival instinct was that I was okay and I was going to be okay. But I ended up in hospital. I was diagnosed with a concussion and whiplash and some other injuries in my neck and my back. Ultimately, I was unable to return to work. I tried for a year and a half to return to work, and anytime I returned to the office, it was a challenge. There were some days getting dressed was all I could do. I was a suit and tie guy. There were mornings when I put on my tie, and that was basically the end. I wanted to go back to bed. I was in physiotherapy. I did all the things I needed to do to try and get better physically. But it wasn't until I took a trip to Vancouver to see my brother one weekend. There were some very serious contemplations about how I might be able to end my life on that road trip. I don't know what prevented me from ultimately taking my own life, but the demons, the questions, the voices were there. And fortunately, I decided that I would ignore those voices. I came back to Calgary, reached out for help through our employee assistance program. I was working for a telecommunications company in Calgary, and I started getting the help that I needed. I lost my job eventually. I was called out at work by my colleagues, people who I thought were my friends, about the amount of time that I was taking off of work, about my attitude towards work, some of my erratic behavior at work. I lost my home. I wasn't a homeowner, but I couldn't afford to pay rent any longer. I was questioned at every turn from our insurer with regard to short-term disability, and eventually that was cut off. I was denied long-term disability, which meant after earning a 6-figure salary for a couple of years and essentially doing whatever I wanted in life, I was back in Winnipeg, and I was living on my grandfather's pull-out couch in my early 30s. Emotionally, I didn't really like very many people. Physically, there was no question about the injuries that I had suffered, although insurance companies like to question everything. I dealt with a lot of that, and then that turns into self-doubt, and then that sort of spirals into depression. It spirals into questioning who you are. Turns into family and friends questioning your motives about how tough you really are. The whole idea of suck it up and get back in the game was something that I ran into on a very regular basis. And it wasn't only until a couple of very caring doctors, one psychologist, 2 psychologists actually, and a psychiatrist determined that I was in fact dealing with a frontal lobe brain injury. And so that affected my ability to organize anything in my life. And so finally I had an answer as to what I was dealing with. I can remember Dr. Fred Shane telling me that I think you have a frontal lobe brain injury, and I think it's affecting your ability to do the things that you normally do with ease. He went to Vancouver for Christmas one year, went for lunch with my brother to learn more about me before the car accident. I know that my psychologist, Dr. Janine Cutler, did the same with my dad, did the same with two of my ex-girlfriends. She wanted to know about the differences. And when they both laid out that treatment plan and were committed to speaking to people that could maybe put into words who I was better than I was able to, because that was sort of broken for me. My confidence was broken, and I questioned everything, not only about the car accident and what it had done, but what it had done and who I was my entire life, because that's what happens when your life is under the microscope. They want to know your story. They want to know, who you are at your core. And so in the middle of your worst time, you're answering the questions about, the decisions you made at 18 or 19, all that now. That book is now open. And that's part of therapy. That's part of getting better, is that deconstruction, but it's exhausting. And typically it's happening when you're at your worst, certainly not when you're at your best. I can tell you this without question, I get at least a headache every single day. And it might be just for 20 seconds. It might be longer. But I have something going on in my head every single day, some sort of physical manifestation of those injuries. I'm still short-tempered. Some people would say that was maybe always a thing, but this has definitely been magnified over the years. If a guy who has been through what I've been through, has the shortcomings that I have, can live the life that I've led in terms of following my passion, my dreams, I think anybody can. If you're fortunate enough to be self-aware of the situation you're in, there are resources out there. If you're lucky enough to be in a company with an employee assistance program, use that, because that probably saved my life. And just being true to yourself and just be honest in your therapy, honest in your desire, and when you're asking for help, there's not always somebody that's going to answer the phone on the other side. Don't quit. Don't let today define your tomorrow. Don't let your yesterdays be so heavy that you don't want to contemplate tomorrow. And ask for help, because there are people out there that do want to help. Like I say, I talk for a living on the radio, and I know there are listeners out there who think I'm an idiot because there are long pauses often in my delivery. That's because I'm looking for a word, that quite possibly is the simplest word in the English language, and I just can't yank it at that particular time. Or a statistic or a number that should be second nature. But that's my reality. And so I've sort of stopped apologizing for it. And so I get frustrated by it, but it's just a way of life, but it's not going to stop me from doing what I love. I don't think our biggest challenge is stigma anymore. I think our biggest challenge is those resources and making sure the resources are in place for those that have been strong enough, those that have been willing to fight through that stigma, to ignore it. And so now here we sort of sit at this precipice where the need for the service far outstrips the ability to provide it. And that's because a lot of dudes have said, there's something not right. And that's because there are enough people prepared to come out and say, hey, I've been down this road, and I'm not pointing at myself, I'm pointing at others that said it was okay to talk about this. Michael Landsberg, broadcaster, sick, not weak. Sick, not weak. If you have a cast on your wrist, people know you've broken your wrist. Can I sign your cast? When are you going to be out of it? What's the plan? You're on crutches. People see in your walking boot. What happened? You have a story, you tell the story, there's a plan. There's a therapy plan. There's a roadmap to get you back to 100%. But when this isn't right, the public doesn't know. Your best friend, your partner, you might not even know. And we just have to keep asking not only the questions outwardly, but inwardly. Am I okay? That self-check-in is really important. And it's okay for guys to cry. It's okay for guys to not be okay.